And then we'll now turn you over to our Historic Preservation Officer, Zach Lick.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach Lechner. As Shauna mentioned, I'm the City of Tempe Historic Preservation Officer. Welcome to this second set of public meetings for the Downtown Historic Core Plan. We have our members of our consultant team from MIG and PMM on the line here with us who are going to be making a presentation to you and are available to answer your questions as am I. Just wanted to mention a couple of things. So we have there's a website which Shauna can share with you, which is our Downtown Historic Core Plan website. Is hosted on the larger city of Tempe website. It's where you can take a survey associated with kind of the current presentation that you'll be hearing today. Now, this presentation is obviously, like any presentation, will kind of contain highlights of some of the very preliminary draft guidelines and recommendations in the plan. I do want to stress that these are very preliminary concepts. I know sometimes there's a tendency when we see things in black and white to think, "Oh no, this is the final the final version." We are far from that. It's still 3.5 months before we plan to bring this plan to City Council, and there will be additional. We don't even have the full plan, drafted at this point. So there will be another set of meetings in May, public meetings and meetings with commissions and additional stakeholder meetings to further refine the plan. And at that point in May is when we'll actually have a draft plan available. Still won't be set in stone. Will still be available for changes and feedback. So right now, what our consultants are presenting are just a preliminary, very preliminary draft guidelines. And if you would like more information, we do have an outline and guidelines document. It's just a couple of, again, very preliminary, very rough draft chapters, and that's hosted on the same website where you will find the survey. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rick Barrett from MIG and Corky Poster from PMM. They're our consultants on the project, and they'll be presenting an update on planning for the Downtown Historic Core Plan. So take it away, Rick. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Zachary. Again, my name is Rick Barrett with MIG, and to my right is Corky with PMM, and we'll both be sharing this presentation today. We have a brief presentation, a little bit over 30 minutes in length, and we're going to focus on these things you see on the screen. Talk a little bit about project background. We'll cover the schedule. We'll talk about our community engagement and participation efforts to date. We'll talk about the plan area, and as Zachary said, some of the emerging draft plan recommendations and draft plan design guidelines, and then we'll follow up with next steps, and that'll be the presentation, and then we'll turn it over to the group for the attendees today for Q&A. So the background into the project, as identified here, it's the Downtown Historic Core Plan, and it's really based on implementing the General Plan Policy HP 7. It's also focused on establishing a planning framework and study area and providing the proper context for balancing historic preservation and downtown growth, while also recognizing cultural and historic connections and informing, at the end of the day, future policy and implementation options. We began this project in 2025 with analysis, data gathering, which progressed into community engagement towards the end of 2025. The first series of community workshops we had were in December 4th, in fact. And so this area indicated on the right is where we are now. This is what we call the plan development, or in other words, the working phase of the project. And as Zachary mentioned, we're beginning to develop these initial recommendations based on all the community input we've had to date. We've had a series of meetings, again, over the course of 2025, continuing today. So we've met with the DRC, the Development Review Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, indicated in the upper left. That was back in the fall, September, October timeframe. We conducted a community survey in November. Then we went back and met with the Development Review Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission in early December. And then that was followed by a city council study session in early January. In addition to that, we've had a number of small group focus meetings as indicated below, which had been very important, and those small group focus meetings will continue. So key takeaways from what we've heard to date are really pretty clear to us. So the first one indicated here is preserving cultural identity, particularly around the Tempe Butte, including view sheds, balancing growth and context, or in other words, tailoring the design guidelines to fit the character of the historic core. We also want to fill everyday gaps and find ways to incentivize daily serving uses. Fourth, we're planning for flexibility and certainty, providing adaptable standards with really clear guidance to support housing and mixed-use growth. And then finally, the importance of the public realm, prioritizing shade, walkability, and finding opportunities for improving and creating public gathering spaces. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corky.
Good afternoon. I'm Corky Poster, an architect and planner with Poster Murto McDonald, and we're a sub-consultant to MIG. Happy to be here. So glad that we have so many people on the call. This is a real good opportunity to review where we are and where we should go. We developed plan goals really from the start of the project that have been modified a little bit, but have been steady throughout. Celebrate history, expanding the protections for historic resources, promoting context-sensitive development. We're clear that development is going to occur downtown. We want to guide it and make sure it's sensitive to the context around it. Support mixed-use growth, encouraging adaptive reuse, and most importantly, ensuring a balanced approach to development with making sure we, on one hand, deal with the historic resources, on the other, with the burgeoning growth in downtown Tempe. We're interested in, of course, in enhancing historic economic vitality with looking particularly at underutilized infill opportunities. We also recognize that tourism and local businesses is really important to the future of Tempe, and then balancing density and making sure that the historic resources are protected, and doing that on a parcel by parcel basis. And then finally, to strengthen downtown Tempe identity. We had lots of folks talk to us about how important the identity is to the economy and the sense of Tempe. And we feel like we can reinforce that with public art, looking at historic resources, wayfinding, and particularly pedestrian connections to adjacent landmarks. We've spent a lot of time looking at the plan area. In other words, what are the boundaries of our study area? Our definition is a downtown historic core, but what does that mean? Obviously, there are three words and there are three pieces to that. Downtown in the sense that it's a walkable mixed-use environment, the center of commerce, public life, and cultural activity. And it has historic resource, civic resources, and new higher density development. Second word in that definition is historic. We've got historic fabric. We've identified 30 some odd historic resources within the downtown area. And that reflects the scale, the character, the materials, and the pattern. And trying to unify, we have a unified context that we need to maintain. And then finally, the core, which is the symbolic and functioning heart of downtown, helping to protect integrity, reinforcing the identity, provide clarity for owners, developers, and the public, balance preservation with compatible change, and retain a legible and vibrant historic fabric. So in doing that, we have identified on this map lots of different pieces. In green, we've got the City of Tempe Preserve open space. And then in darker color, we've identified what we're calling the downtown historic core. And yet that's surrounded by other commercial and historic properties And so that lighter blue boundary heading to the south and to the west is our study area. We've studied that part, and we'll have some recommendations that relate to those peripheral areas. So we look for opportunities and considerations going forward. So let's first of all look at the elements of our current core area. We've got historic resources shown in the stars with the circle around them, and those, as you can see, are largely in and around Mill Avenue. We're looking at potential pedestrian paseos to the Tempe Beach Park to the north, to Tempe Butte to the east, and then transit connections on that transit corridor south of the Tempe Butte. And then finally, open space connections and multimodal connections shown by those other areas. How do we get pedestrians through blocks and to the places that they're trying to go to? We look pretty closely at the important considerations. We've got context that is not historic shown in the stripes. We've got potential impacts. We heard a lot about view sheds to Tempe Butte, and we're taking that pretty seriously. Also, we've identified what we call the consistent street wall along Mill Avenue, that 1, 2, and 3-story frontage that really defines the historic character. We're looking at the 3rd Street, Mill Avenue transit core, and then what I talked about before, the views to Tempe Butte. So we put together a draft plan, and I'm going to echo what Zach said. Folks come to a public meeting and think all the decisions are made. That's not the case. We're here to have some tentative decisions that we're interested in the feedback from folks on this call. We've got another workshop meeting at 3 o'clock and another public meeting at 6. So we're going to talk about the introduction, the plan goals, the historic core recommendations and strategies, design guidelines, and then eventually implementation. I'm going to turn this back to Rick to talk a little bit about several sections of the outline plan.
Sure, thank you, Corky. And in fact, we're gonna cover 6 sections in order. They will be land use and development, economic development, public realm and placemaking, mobility and parking, infrastructure and sustainability, and historic preservation. And then within each of these 6 elements, or 6 chapters, if you will, we're gonna have 4 slides just so you understand the logic. We're gonna talk about what we've heard, what our initial recommendations are, the reasoning or the why, and then how do we make that happen? So for the first one, which is land use and development, what we've heard. So this is what we've heard to date from all of our engagement activities. Context matters most, really putting a strong emphasis on highly specific tailoring of land uses, density, and building form to surrounding uses and neighborhoods. And as I mentioned earlier, flexibility over rigidity, adaptable to zoning and development standards to accommodate future change. We've heard that quite a bit. So our initial recommendations are establish the downtown Tempe Historic Core Design Guidelines and explore this as a potential transfer sending area for TDR, transfer of development rights. Second emerging recommendation, provide clear design guidelines and opportunities for infill, adaptive reuse, and redevelopment. And then finally, identify growth areas that are beyond the historic core for increased employment and housing that conforms to the general plan. So the reasoning or the why. So why are we making these initial recommendations? Well, one, obviously based on community input, but importantly to maintain and reconnect the low-scale historic fabric of Mill Avenue and provide opportunity for infill growth with sites identified as prime opportunities for development. So how do we make this happen? So considerations include focusing growth on the catalytic sites for growth and opportunity, and encouraging mixed use and vertical intensity where appropriate. And this may include incentives such as density bonuses for preservation, transfer of development rights, which I just mentioned, and providing a streamlined approval process for maximum efficiency. So the second category is economic development and what we've heard to date from the community and our engagement activities. So everyday uses such as dry cleaners, hardware stores, pharmacies are missing from downtown. So how can we bring those back to downtown? Secondly, what we've heard is supporting small local owned businesses within the downtown historic core is very important, but also balancing growth, pair protections for local character and existing residents with the support for growth. So what are the initial recommendations? Well, those include aligning incentives, facade improvements, and tenant support programs with community partners. Secondly, supporting sidewalk dining and programming to increase foot traffic in the downtown area. And then finally, exploring opportunities for incubator-style business hubs or public markets to serve as gathering spaces for that type of economic catalyst. The reasoning, again, the why. Well, the reason we're making these initial recommendations, again, in addition to community input, is sustaining a high energy, pedestrian-oriented environment downtown. Secondly, supporting a park once approach by attracting a variety of users and shoppers to downtown. And then finally, supporting the general plan and access to daily needs. And how can we make that happen for economic development? Considerations include locating everyday businesses in relationship to parking is important. We've heard that on numerous times. And then providing the resident serving uses I mentioned previously, pharmacies, hardware stores, typically are the last to arrive in a growing urban core and tied to occupied housing. Incentives include marketing partnerships, incubator partnerships, and partnerships for event sponsorship. Third category, public realm and placemaking, what we've heard from the public. Use the public realm to really tell the complete story of downtown and Tempe through buildings, signs, interpretation, walking tours. Secondly, the importance of gathering spaces and public open space was emphasized on a number of occasions, utilizing existing spaces and improving upon them to advance these goals. And then finally, emphasizing the desert identity of Tempe and provide opportunities for the stories of the 4 Southern tribes to be told and interpreted in the downtown area. So these initial recommendations include establishing civic anchors that signal you are in the downtown historic core, primarily at 5th and Mill and Rio Salado and Mill intersections. Secondly, establishing and creating a cultural spine system through street level art and activations, architectural improvements, shade structures, of course, and integrated wayfinding elements and signage. And then thirdly, use underutilized facade and secondary wall conditions for curated murals, rotating works of art, and temporary installations. The why, the reasoning. Well, besides, again, hearing those points of emphasis from the public, it creates layered storytelling that builds identity and reinforces the cultural and historic stories of Tempe. And secondly, it will support the ease of movement to and from downtown historic core for all modes of transportation. And how do we make that happen? Considerations include prioritizing using artists from the 4 Southern tribes, prioritize Mill Avenue, and extend east-west once anchors are completed on Mill Avenue, but don't overwhelm the public with large installations. Incentives that can possibly be provided include financial support through the capital improvement program, third-party grants, and reinvestment of sales tax related to construction. And then again, as we've mentioned on some of these other elements, forming strategic partnerships, public-private partnerships, and considering sponsorships from nonprofits and other entities. On to the fourth category, mobility and parking, what we've heard from the public through our workshops, encouraging mixed-use activities where it strengthens walkability and prioritizes multimodal access. Really take a look at the impact that development has on sidewalks, streets, and parking. And then thirdly, the light rail and streetcar are significant, huge investments that need to be leveraged to the fullest extent possible. Initial recommendations for mobility and parking include prioritizing short-term, high turnover parking along Mill Avenue and strategically locate longer-term parking on the edges of the district. Secondly, keeping surface lots discrete and at the edges of the downtown historic core. And then outside of the historic core, strategically prioritize parking hubs that provide ample supply to serve the broader downtown. And the why, what's the reasoning for these initial recommendations? Well, the historic core serves as Tempe's version of a walkable historic retail center. And secondly, we want to maintain the continuous street wall by keeping parking lots and driveways away from Mill Avenue. How do we make that happen? Short-term parking along Mill Avenue allows businesses to serve more customers, as we have talked about, providing clear wayfinding and signage to divert drivers off of Mill Avenue and have them go straight to long-term parking areas. And then thirdly, intuitive egress that minimizes cut-through traffic, and that can be also solved with improved wayfinding and signage. Well, how do we make this happen financially? So we can seek grants for transportation, safety, sustainability to help fund these improvements. There's regional funding options, development impact fees, parking district revenue, and demand-based pricing. And again, forming strategic public-private partnerships. Before I hand it over to Corky for historic preservation, I'll talk briefly here about infrastructure and sustainability. What we've heard to date, a clear one, obviously, is providing more shade where possible, the importance of public realm improvements, and minimal water use and native vegetation have been brought up consistently as key environmental topics as well. Initial recommendations include leveraging the investments already made in the downtown refresh to set a high bar for sustainable private development and long-term infrastructure performances throughout downtown. Secondly, incorporate shaded frontages, which we've mentioned a number of times today already, low impact stormwater systems, and tree canopy extension into the private realm design guidelines. And then finally, continue streetscape improvements east-west from Mill Avenue going forward to establish a cohesive streetscape throughout the downtown historic core. And again, the reasoning, the recent upgrades on Mill Avenue through the downtown refresh project must be utilized as a new standard, which really sets the bar higher for future infrastructure and sustainability measures. How can we make that happen? Well, some of the considerations include providing opportunities for additional infrastructure or sustainability measures need to be examined. And then investment within the public right-of-way should coincide with private investment to maximize improvements. And then incentives would include financial support through utility rebates, third-party grants, and expedited permitting, as we mentioned earlier in this presentation. And again, forming additional partnerships, which we've talked about, for infrastructure and cost sharing. And with that, I'll turn it back to Corky.
Thank you. This last section is on historic preservation, obviously an important part of the historic downtown core. And what we've heard, and we had lots of impact and lots of comments, existing listed historic resources should be well protected and preserved, that Tempe has a certain character and authenticity that is part of its unique quality. The connection between old and new is important. We understand there'll be new development along the core, but what is the connection? What is the relationship? What is the compatibility between old and new? And maintain the integrity of historic areas so that there is a consistent character to it. Recommendations is prioritize preservation and rehabilitation of historic resources. Again, we've heard that loud and clear from lots of folks, especially from the Historic Preservation Commission, as you might guess. Develop guidelines through this planning effort to ensure and present ways for folks to be able to accomplish that. Consider capital C, applying to place the downtown historic core as a National Register Historic District, which is a separate application than individual listing. And listing additional city-owned historic resources in the National Register of Historic Places. As some of you may know, the city has recently acquired some additional historic properties, and figuring out the list of historic properties in Tempe, as our inventory has shown, has some on some lists, some on the others, but we're trying to clear up those relationships. The reasoning is that resources within the downtown historic core have the distinction of existing within a context really only part of the downtown Tempe core, with some consistent fabric and design language that connects individual resource to each other. So we have a core of 1, 2, and 3-story buildings that really provide a unique character to the downtown historic core. Considerations: implement facade conservation to protect that street wall that Rick was talking about. Careful design of infill to reconnect properties to historic fabric, and incentives for preservation and rehabilitation. What might those incentives be? Possibly third-party grants, tax incentives, and technical assistance. And then possibly the transfer of development right. Rick didn't explain the details of what that means, and some might not be familiar with that term, but what it says is if your development rights are reduced in one portion of your site or the city, you get to recoup those in other portions. So it's a way to sort of both end, to get the preservation goals that are needed, but not to diminish the development rights of any landowner. And then the city has been aggressive in its purchase of historic resources. We think that's a very good thing, and we think that would give lots of flexibility for the city of Tempe. I'm going to go through some draft design guidelines and talk our way through that. The guidelines are intended to provide clear and predictable framework. We know both from a historic point of view and from a development point of view, things that are hazy and unpredictable are sort of the worst for both of those groups. Preserving the historic street wall and fine-grained character of those several blocks of Mill Avenue, but at the same time supporting economic vitality and reinvestment. And finally, enhancing the pedestrian comfort and climate resilience in our desert environment. I'm going to break those down into some specific areas. Respect the street wall, and that image on the top right really shows clearly the kind of thing we're talking about. There's a certain character and pedestrian scale that's really important. Accommodate growth strategically, looking for the best place from a development point of view and from a historic point of view for where development can and should occur. Prioritize public realm, encourage authentic contemporary design. That is, we're not looking for mimicry in new development. We're looking for a way to make it compatible to historic, but not necessarily kind of a Disneyland approach to that. And then above all, also to design for climate. We're in an extreme climate here, as you all know, getting a little more extreme every day, and we need to design for that, and we are capable of doing that. What we heard, limit high-rise in the core area, retain the low-scale architectural characters present in historic buildings. New buildings should be compatible with the historic massing of buildings. So we're starting to look at height zones where within the historic core, we're looking at a Mill Avenue height zone, a secondary street, and then gateway and transition. And on that map, we've identified the historic resources within that area. So we're looking at starting to develop appropriate heights for those areas, 28 to 36 feet as the base height with a maximum height of 65 feet, and then much more height elevation back behind there, perhaps up to 100 feet. You can see that there are some historic resources that are falling into that green area, and that's where just careful design is going to have to be most important. What we've heard, new buildings should respect the historic character and not overpower historic buildings with incompatible architecture. The objective is to reinforce the fine-grained pattern of historic buildings, and that buildings should reflect the traditional storefront width and vertical proportions. And there's detail on that, dividing facades, providing vertical articulation, ground floor heights along Mill Avenue that's the first floor to floor level. with a retail height characteristic that's typical of urban areas. Buildings longer than 100 feet should have horizontal articulation, again, to make things interesting for pedestrians, not have uninterrupted horizontal surfaces that provide no interest to pedestrians walking the street. In terms of ground floor, what we've heard, emphasize indoor-outdoor connections, public realm improvements, and create an atmosphere for small, independently owned businesses and entrepreneurs to thrive. And that would be to create a vibrant first level ground floor with signage, with transparency into windows, with the ability for outdoor seating, et cetera. So we're talking specifically about active commercial and community serving uses on 80% of Mill Avenue, transparency between 2 and 4 feet, 10 feet above the sidewalk, and prohibiting blank walls as a way that creates dead areas where pedestrians have no interesting things to look at. I'm going to turn it back to Rick for final implementation comments.
All right. Thank you, Corky. Just a few more slides to go before we turn it over to you for input and discussion. So how do we implement this? So our final report will include tools and recommendations, in the final report, as we say here. Those will really focus on catalytic sites, catalyst projects, regulatory tools, funding and financing mechanisms, and then finally, methods for monitoring and metrics, all regarding implementation. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're in the closing months of the project, phase 3, the plan development phase, or the working phase, as we call it. Zachary mentioned we'll be back in May with another set of community meetings. We have additional stakeholder meetings coming up, and the intent is to go to City Council in July of 2026 with the final report for review and approval and City Council adoption. And we also have a survey that's in the works that closes on March 18th, and I believe Shauna will be maybe posting that in the chat. And that brings us to the conclusion of the presentation.
Now's the time for Q&A. And so we're happy to open it to the floor. I'm just going to stop sharing and get back to a chance for everybody to have an opportunity to speak. Sorry, I lost that. Close that. We've had a lot of stakeholder meetings. We've had some good attendance at some less attendance at others. The plan, as we said earlier, is in the very malleable early phases. So even if you haven't had a chance to attend an earlier meeting, now is a great chance to give us some guidance. And let's maybe use the raise hand function and we'll go through. I think I can see everyone. Who will start us off? Well, maybe just unmute yourself for now. I'm not seeing a lot of hands. So if you can unmute yourself, then we'll know who wants to say what. Sean.
And Corky, David
Yeah.
asked in the chat if he could see the height map again.
Yeah, let's see. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't mean to get rid of that. I didn't.
Just give us a second here.
Just give us a second to bring that PowerPoint back up. Okay. Yeah, that one. Oh. Yeah. Just share your screen.
Okay, there we are.
Can you all see that?
Yes. And David, the map is also online, as well as in a PDF and image, so you can zoom in and out as well. But did you have a question related to the map?
Well, I'm looking on there. It looks like so the Hackett House is not included on this map, and neither is the Performing Arts Center.
The Hackett House is right in the corner
Oh,
of that green area, inside the green area, not inside the Mill Avenue area. And talking about the theater, it
yeah.
is
I'm
right.
talking about the affordable housing project the city was working on.
So the purple area on both sides goes back a dimension, something like 70 feet from the east and west property line of Mill. So, for example, if you're talking about the Hackett House property, that RFP,
There was a Performing Arts Center one. It's next to, I think it's next to City Hall, but I think this boundary stops at City Hall.
City Hall is the sort of bottom, not quite all the way bottom right, but the bottom right um, dot in that square at City Hall.
Okay.
That's City Hall.
Um, can you give us any more details about how the development right transfer would work? I think most of the downtown area is already high density, so where would those rights transfer to?
Well, there's two ways to do that. First of all, later on, the recommendations are that each of these negotiations are done on a site-by-site basis. Every site that we have, as you know, is a unique site. And all the development that's occurred up and down this core area has come through a development agreement with the developer. And so there are sort of two potential aspects of development rights depending on the specific parcel involved. One is that if you're restricted to a lower height, or if the negotiation or the goal is to have a lower height along Mill Avenue, then perhaps you can make that height up elsewhere. And then in other cities, transfer development rights may pertain to other sites and other locations and other parcels outside of the study area. So if you've got the ability to do an 8-story building and there's a strong reason for it to be 4 stories, then perhaps you can add 4 stories to another development site that you have. In other words, make sure that you're whole from the point of view of your economic opportunity, but slide it around from one location to another, either within a site or between sites. Does that make any more sense, David?
I'm just not quite sure I understand how that would work with the city's general plan, how that would conform to the general plan, but I don't want to take up too much time. I also wanted to ask about parking, because I'm on the city's transportation commission and we've talked a lot about parking on Mill Avenue. I personally feel like we need to remove the on-street parking and stop relying on the parking so much. We've had a lot of people that have complained that, for one thing, they just don't want to walk from the parking garages, which is a problem from a transportation perspective, from just in general, from an economic perspective. We need to make sure people feel safe and it's walkable and comfortable and all of those details. But the idea that we're going to rely on parking and we're going to direct people to parking, I'm concerned about that. I think that historically cars were less impactful on society. Mill Avenue probably could be car free or partially car free or something like that. So I'm just not sure how I feel about that. I do think that we have issues with like people parking in bus stops, and we need parking for disabled people, and we need pickup and drop off, and we need truck loading and unloading, and there are just a dozen different uses that we needed besides just parking cars on the street. And we have this issue where the parking garages are underutilized. So I just think that's something that the city really needs to look carefully at, both from a transportation perspective and from a historical perspective. That draws a lot of people from tourism. When you remove the cars and you have more public spaces and you have more walkability, that can itself become a draw for tourism and puts more highlight on the historical aspects of the area. So I think that's something that the city really needs to consider. Thank you.
Those are great comments, David. And we will take that as we move forward. Let me just still can't see anyone. So I'm
So
going to.
Shireen had her hand up next. And then Moonshadow, you'll be next, or we can take your question in the chat. So either way. Shireen, if you want to come off mute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I serve on the Historic Preservation Commission, actually, it really helps to have that map up,
Okay.
if you can leave that up there.
Yeah, hold on.
I know it makes it harder for you to see who's asking.
Yeah, we either see you or,
You have to go back to the Zoom to share. Hang on a second.
yeah. Shireen, is this the right map?
Let's-
It's not up yet.
yeah. So, all right, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see that, Shireen?
Yes, thank you very much. So one of the questions I have is pertaining to the boundaries. Most of not the core along Mill Avenue, that dark green area, but the commission has mentioned, I think a couple of times, and people have mentioned moving over the boundary to College because you do have historic properties that extend that, and this seems a little arbitrary over at Forest versus going all the way to College. You still don't have that on this map, but there are historic properties in there as part of this, and I'm talking about the light green boundary.
I get it. Yeah.
Okay. That's been mentioned a few times about the importance of that because of the number of historic properties that go throughout that area, and to not include those doesn't make sense. It's kind of an arbitrary forest avenue. So I just wanted to mention that again as part of it, because we can see that we know that there are other places there. So just
Are you talking in addition to St. Mary's?
yeah, over to on the right. Well, you have even where Postino's is. That was a historic
Right. Got it.
building. So it's
Okay.
that just along College. I mean, we had requested that. I know the commission had said that we thought that it should move over to include that because it's part of that zone that we still have.
Okay.
And that's one comment. A second comment, I would like to hear a little bit more about, and I have a lot of other comments, but I may save those for the chat or something else. But for right now, I'd love to hear more about who your stakeholder meetings were with, because you've mentioned them several times. How have you held? Who's been part of those meetings? Who's been attending those meetings? Because I even look at, this one, if this is considered a stakeholder meeting, there's some members of the public, a lot of staff. I know that we're opening it up tonight again to more members of the public, but could you please explain a little bit more about your stakeholder meetings?
Yeah. We've sort of had two categories of meetings, Shireen. One we called stakeholder meetings, which were targeted invitations to various groups that had interest in each of the elements. And then we've had public meetings like this one, where everyone's invited, they're listed publicly. So we've had rounds of meetings with preservation, business owners, property owners, active developers, several meetings with the tribes, and let me see. Is that still up?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see the
Okay.
list. What kind of attendance have you had at those? Because we've heard.
It varied. We've had robust attendance at some of those. The most disappointing meeting were the businesses. We invited 80 different businesses along in the area, and we had one business show up. Several people were on that call. But we've taken additional efforts since then to be able to get more input. It's been my experience doing lots of these meetings that folks start to show up when the recommendations come up. And so we expect some more robust participation, and we're doing another round of those stakeholder meetings. But the focus of our meetings were stakeholder meetings. You can see the number of those small group ones, public meetings, both online and in person. Today, we also have a workshop at 3:00 for folks to be able to walk in and see stuff on the walls. And then multiple meetings with the Historic Commission, the Design Review Committee, and the Mayor and Council. So several levels of that.
Just as a quick follow-up, and then I'll stop so others can talk. The workshop today is not open to the public then, right? Because we haven't heard about it. That's something else?
It was intended for folks that neither could come to the meeting tonight or attend this online meeting. And we worked with the City of Tempe to organize that.
Okay, so the fact that I never heard about it, even being on the HPC, I guess I'm trying to figure out who's.
It's the same content as the meeting you're in right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're just,
Shereen,
it's an open house, sorry, not a workshop.
Yeah.
It's an open house. And all three meetings we're having today are identical in content, just a different format. Because different
Yeah.
people could attend different meetings.
Shereen, and I'll clarify further too. So the meeting at 3 o'clock is from, or the open house, I should say, from 3 to 5:30. It's really designed to target property owners and business owners in the downtown. So the outreach for those meetings really went out to property owners and business owners. So that's probably why you didn't hear about that. I know there was, because in part, as Corky mentioned, because there was poor attendance at the previous stakeholder meeting targeted at that important group of individuals. We wanted to, while our consultants were in town, just take the opportunity, for an in-person meeting. And there will be an additional, I just wanted to mention, there'll be an additional online meeting for that property owner, business owner, stakeholder group in the coming weeks. So, even if, folks aren't able to attend in person, which, we understand, because in fact, many of the property owners, business owners, are not actually in the city or even in the state. We'll have an online option so that we can make sure that we can, gather their comments and address their concerns as well.
Shereen, that was when we presented to the mayor and council, that was specific. There was concern, and we shared that concern that we had not yet had enough participation from property owners and businesses. Those stakeholder meetings were not well attended, and we had direction from mayor and council at that in-person meeting, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, to make sure that we made extra effort to engage those stakeholders.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just last comment, and I'll get off, is have you thought about actually being inclusive to allow both historic preservation developers, business owners, the public, all to be together, not just like this, but to have kind of a roundtable discussion to see if there can be some commonalities that are found. And then, because when you hear things in silos, it's really hard to find those commonalities that may exist across different groups. So just a thought as you go forward with more public meetings, it might.
That's a great idea. I mean,
thank you.
Our sense of getting all those folks in the room, as you suggest, is meetings like this, but maybe sitting around a table might be a better way to do that. And it makes things easier for us because it's uncomfortable for us to be the mediator between different voices talking to us in silos. So that's a great suggestion, Shereen. We'll explore that.
Thank you.
Moonshadow, I believe your hand was next if you wanted to come off mute.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I represent the Mill Avenue shops at 414 South Mill on the west side of Mill Avenue in the core historic area. And the owner would like to get clarification. Are these restrictions, height restrictions, would they interfere with the owner trying to sell the property to a high-rise developer?
There are no restrictions. These are guidelines and recommendations for site-by-site development agreements to be negotiated. So this is not intended to be regulatory. It's intended to be guidelines to both the preservation advocates within the city and the development folks to guide future development. Which building are you in?
The Mill Avenue shops, it's from 4th Street almost to 5th Street. There's another property on 5th Street. We're next to each other. Tacos Calafia is on
Okay.
the north side of the building, and Sexy Burgers on the south side.
Okay, now I know where it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Simple answer to your question is we are not proposing any restrictions. We're proposing guidelines of what we think would best preserve the historic character of Mill Avenue.
Okay.
And
And
additional
this,
guidelines that would preserve the other historic resources back away from Mill Avenue.
okay. And this is all just in a draft stage. You'll have
Absolutely.
more meetings in May, and then it'll get presented in July to the city council.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to piggyback on that. I mean, it can't be, bears repeating, can't be hit too many times, I think. But yeah, Moonshadow is very much a preliminary plan. These guidelines are even broad categories are not, set in stone. And so, additional conversations between the consultant and city staff, these kind of feedback from these kind of meetings, from the stakeholder meetings, from, speaking with boards and commissions, mayor and council, these all inform, eventually what will end up in the plan in May. So yeah, I don't want anyone to despair if they see something in the plan that they object to, or thinking like, well, why is that in there, or something like that. Please provide us feedback, and which we'll take very seriously. And this is the document that I referenced at the beginning of the meeting, the kind of draft outline and guidelines, which are what this presentation derives from. Really is a living document at this point. Nothing set in stone, and so it's we're looking for your input to continue to revise it, to create guidelines that work both for historic preservation and robust development in the downtown. That's obviously our twin guiding stars. So just wanted to reiterate that one more time.
The one point I want to make, though, Mujado, is that it is possible that we need to look carefully in our next step at parcels and how those parcels may or may not cross that line between purple and green. And so that notion of transfer of development rights. So if there's a parcel that is bifurcated, cut in half by the purple and the green, it might well be that heights that are discouraged in the purple area might be added to the green area, so that the net result is the same developable area for that developer as the expectation might have been for a developer or for a potential sale to another developer. So what you're reminding me is, as we develop this further, we should get more fine-grained and look at the impact on certain parcels or certain owner clusters of parcels and see how this would impact that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, because it looks like on this property that I'm representing, that the very front part of it is in the purple, and then the back part of it is in the green. So it's like it could have a short front and a tall back.
That's
I mean,
exactly where we're going.
okay.
Okay,
Right.
and so the notion would be that the net to that owner of the property would be the same. It just would be pushing some height in one place and moving it into another.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we have, a few more questions, and maybe just to clarify on the timeline, just a small thing, but mayor and council haven't set the schedule for the past June, so it should be sometime in the summer 2026. Stu, you have your hand next?
Yeah, hi there. Well, having been involved in the downtown redevelopment ever since the early 1970s, and as a property owner, developer, and mostly as an architect, uh, I got to tell you, I couldn't be happier with the general approach that you're taking. So many of these standards that you're proposing, we've been fighting over trying to accomplish these for many, many years. And I particularly liked the idea of considering the original fabric of the downtown, consisting of lots that are 25, 50, and 75 feet wide, with changing roof lines, and incorporating that into the design guidelines. I think will do an awful lot to retain the historic character. So I worked with the city for the last couple of years on the historic core plan. I forgot what it's called even. But the biggest challenge that we ran into, and I'm sure you know about it, is Prop 207.
I sure do.
And how do you address that requirement that property owners need to be compensated if their properties have a result that a land use act results in diminishment of their property values. And I know incentives are one approach, but that's really one of the largest challenges I think that we face in order to go forward with many of your proposals. So that's my question.
That's a great comment. First, for folks that are not familiar with Proposition 207, it was a statewide law. I think it was done by voter approval, that said that if a municipality, or a government entity for that matter, makes a zoning decision that reduces the potential value of a piece of property, then the owner of that property has a right to sue for that difference. In other words, if you've got a piece of property that allows 4 stories, and the municipality changes that to only allow 2 stories, then you're entitled to the additional value of not just the site, but of the development, had you been able to do what you wanted to do. It's a little more complex in downtown Tempe. Almost all of the projects have been moving forward under development agreements, sort of 2 parties agreeing to the conditions. And so these guidelines are not intended to affect zoning. They're intended to provide guidelines to those negotiations. Until now, those negotiations have been well done, but done on a case-by-case basis, without any particular guidelines of how that development agreement might be structured. The intention of this is to provide some guidelines, but it'll always be a case of a mutually agreeable negotiation and decision between the owner of the property and the municipality, if that makes sense.
So how do you enforce height restrictions? Do you
That gets enforced in the agreement that both parties agree to. And some of that could be not height restriction, but height transfer, in answer to the previous question. It's intended to be kind of a crib sheet for the city of Tempe negotiations team on any particular site. But again, it's not a restriction that's being imposed in violation of Proposition 207. It's a guideline to a mutually agreeable negotiation.
Right.
That help?
Yeah, in the urban core master plan idea, we dealt with it with step backs, building step backs, so that a
It's
property
really,
owner.
I mean, we've been studying those setbacks, and thanks for the work that you did on that. And so we're essentially recommending tweaks to those setback profiles that are in that plan.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Rob, you're next.
Sorry, I'm stumbling around here a little bit. Yeah, thank you so much for all your work on this. I wanted to double down on Shireen's suggestion for roundtable discussions, and equally, I know you don't want to bite too much off, but to lean into also David's recommendations for exploring the idea of actually closing Mill and turning it into a pedestrian corridor. Again, I know you probably don't want to bite too much off, but I think those are good ideas. One aspect, and you did reference it, but I hope that the plan really leans in to the element of environmental history, and how the downtown is. We are a desert city, and have that desert heritage, and to really acknowledge that context. You did mention it, but I almost think that there should be a specific environmental component to have people understand. Not only do we have the Butte, but we have the impact and cultural evolution of our city related to its desert situation, and that's all. It's backwards looking into the past, but also it's forward looking into terms of recognizing our sustainable future. And so I think that's something that should really be emphasized a little more. One aspect of the soft tissue is our local live music heritage downtown wasn't referenced. I think that really should be a component. Um, and another one too. And I know this might make your map really awkward, but is the inclusion of the Mill Avenue Bridge. Obviously, again, going back to our environmental history, the Salt River really is fundamental to the foundation of our downtown and why it's there and why we're here as a community. And so the Mill Avenue Bridge, incorporating that into could be a link to the river itself, and making sure that that's understood the significance of water in our heritage. And this obviously goes back not only to our community, modern community, but our tribal narrative as well. And I appreciate you mentioned this a couple times, the importance of authenticity. We need to be smart about this and not make it, downtown's a little cheesy right now. And obviously it's in its a transition phase. So that's always the case. But to really make sure the history is honored authentically and not, like you mentioned, the Disneyfication of it. Um, and two more items and I'll be quiet. I think what should be really emphasized here too is how this mission benefits a rich urbanization narrative. The best high density downtowns and areas have a rich local culture and have elements that make it worth living in high density areas. And in fact, this mission ensures that we're able to create a desirable, rich, sustainable downtown core. It actually encourages um, urbanization, and makes it desirable. If we just do infill, we're going to lose those existing resources, and it will undercut, what makes the downtown Tempe a place that could be effectively urbanized and become a cultural hub for the valley. So I hope there's more emphasis on actually how this mission actually benefits the general plan's sense of an urbanization of the core, because I think um, it's not undercutting. I think it actually is nurturing this mission. And then, sorry, one more thing, I'll shut up. Is there such a thing as an easement transfer where the city purchases the historical preservation easement itself, or the property owner gives it away, and then the owner maintains it as a private property, but and it continues to run it as such for small businesses or something associated. But the easement, historical preservation easement, is applied um, in the long term. Is there such a thing? I'm not sure. Okay, I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Okay, if I could just, great comments, Rob. And you took us to task at our last meeting, I believe, for not having enough comment about the Sonoran Desert. We took that seriously. We tried to increase that, and we'll keep doing that. Thanks for that comment. In terms of preservation easements, we think that's a very powerful tool. We have a file of the many preservation easements that currently exist. And I think we'll be recommending that as the city of Tempe acquires historic properties, like it recently acquired the Tempe National Bank and the Tempe Hardware, that it has the ability to either keep that or keep the historic characteristics by putting a preservation easement on that will then define its future, and which would, as easements do, would run with the land and not be specific to each owner. And then there's a third opportunity, which we have not yet explored, which is a way for the city to be a conduit to acquire historic properties, put an easement on it, and then resell it as a way to sort of the opposite of money laundering, right? A way to put certain conditions on a property by being the ownership conduit from a buyer to a seller. So we'll be exploring all of that as we get much more detailed in this next set of recommendations. So those are all great comments. Thanks for your positive feedback, and we'll take all that seriously.
Okay, and we do still have a couple questions. So Darren, thanks for your patience. If you want to go ahead and ask yours.
Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, Darren Sender, zoning attorney here in downtown Tempe. I'd like to know what developers you've met with and what major property owners yet you've reached out to and met with.
I don't have that list in front of me, but we went through and looked at every single property in and around the downtown, got the emails that we could, and identified as many as we could. I know
because I think there's some pretty big property owners here and pretty big developers that have not gotten notice and do not know about these meetings and do not know what's happening and have not been at the table. We're part of this community as well. And the community of downtown businesses, property owners, and developers are a big part of this proposal. And I have not talked to a single person yet in the development industry that has been one-on-one contacted and or connected to you. The doodle polls don't count. Those were ignored. So I am just really, really curious to see why you're so eager to ignore that entire group of community in the downtown.
Well, I think eager to ignore is not an accurate statement. If we've not been successful at engaging folks, that's on us. But I would take issue with the term eager to ignore. That's 100% not what we're trying to do. We will double down and try to do that. You're here at this meeting, so that's a good start. And any help you can give us to get in touch with that will be helpful. We've been working with Lori Foster. We've been working with Ryan Levesque to make sure that as many people with a economic interest in this area or a civic interest in this area are notified. We're early in the process, so I'm glad you're here today. And
early in the process would have been in September. If you're talking about a June or July approval of this whole document, we need to get more seats at this table. We need to have more voices. And just so Shireen, so you're aware, when you put a guideline of this complexity and a document that is design guidelines that are this complex and this specific, it does act like it is a regulation. This is something that they're trying to tell council, say, hey, if you want to develop here, you get 100 feet or you get 30 feet or you get 36 feet. And that message is passed on to the prospective purchasers of the property. So even though it sounds like it's just a guideline, these are things that could potentially, ultimately, their goal is to restrict the heights of the buildings in these areas. So that's something that I have a big problem with. We already have a wonderful document called the Downtown Design Guidelines. It's got a height map. It's worked very well. There have been many, many, many developers in the downtown who have been preserving these buildings with input from Zach, input from council, input from the HPC, input from DRC over the years. We have many examples of those. I don't see why this map has to change that so radically. Prop 207 definitely will be an issue, Stu. Absolutely. So I am calling on you as the consultants to connect with, and I will give you their personal cell phone numbers to connect with one-on-one to the major property owners in the downtown. People like Wexford, people like Core, people like Tempe Mission Palms, people like Yam, people like Cousins. There are groups out there that should have been met with months ago. So that is my main concern right now. I have just now taken a look at the plan. I can't comment on it yet, but for the fact that it is extremely detailed for a guideline and it looks very regulatory to me. I know that depends on how you adopt it, but we need to get more voices at this table. We are a community of downtown, not just preservation groups. Your meetings with historic preservation groups is wonderful. And the indie communities, that's wonderful. But there are other voices in this downtown that are significant and you will be impacting their properties. Those are the people that need to be spoken to.
Thank you.
Okay, Sam, thanks for your patience. If you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Sam Gordon. Some of you know me from Wexford. I guess I'll start out by saying to echo Darren's comment, I'm really disappointed in not knowing much about this. I mean, I was looking back over my emails in detail, and the first notification I knew anything about this was like a couple weeks ago. I think I got an email from Lori at the DTA telling me about this, and then with some further discussion with Darren, I'm here today. But we're one of the largest property owners in this city, or in this downtown core, I should say, and I knew nothing about this at all. So I'm just curious, like a phone call or a direct email to me, or I'm quite accessible. I just everyone has my cell phone in the city. I just like don't understand why no one's reached out to me about this. What's the answer to that before I give my comment on the plan?
Well, maybe the best thing for me to do is email you the list that we emailed about 4 months ago, and go down that list and see who's on that list and not on that list. We work closely with Lori to get the emails of all the folks that we were able to get. And I'm sure both from Lori and from Ryan that the Wexford name appeared several times on our email list. I'm sorry if it didn't get through. It's not too late to hear your comments.
All right. I mean, like, I'd like to know if it did. I mean, if it did, it was 4 months ago. Like, I get 500 emails a day. I mean, this is important enough where, like, someone should have, from your team or HPC, who we know and worked with on numerous things over the years, could pick up the phone and give us a call. I think that would have been appropriate here. On this plan, I mean, listen, I'm speaking from an investor developer perspective. I don't think anyone can say we don't care about Tempe's historic properties. I mean, we've done more than any other developer in the city. Just on our recent project, beside the First Congressional Church, we preserved two buildings. We preserved the sanctuary, gifted it to the city. We picked up the Harry Walker House on its foundation and moved it a couple blocks away at the city's request. We own the Andre building, which we worked very hard to maintain its facade, despite kind of new tenancies coming in there. But I have some real major concerns about this proposal. And again, I completely understand preserving truly historic buildings in this core, and it's extremely important to me as well, evidenced by things we've done. And things like adding more teeth to protecting those buildings, I can understand. But to have this blanket area, especially the area in green, I can promise you with 1000% certainty it will deter major investment into your city. I could tell you for us, if this was in place, we would, have not invested a dollar into this area. I mean, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars, created, I think, great projects for the area. I think most of the community agrees. Have created huge tax revenues for the city. We work, very closely with City Council, HPC, all stakeholders involved. They always get community involvement. Guys like Phil Yates knows that, and Stu Seifer I've known a long time. So I have some major issues, and while we don't own anything in this, as far as I can tell on this map, I don't think we own anything in this specific area. I can promise you, like, is Mission Palms on this phone call? I mean, they're a major property owner right in that green area, like directly affected by this. I mean, Mission Palms was built in 1985. I understand it's been there for a few decades. It's not a historic building. It's not historically classified like the Andre building is and should be. Are they on this phone call? I mean, there's major property value deterioration here. And I understand their guidelines, and we're talking, with all due respect, semantics. Like that, I understand you're not rezoning the property, but this will no question have major property value deterioration. And I don't think property owners in this area are just going to, clap their hands and say, okay. And I think it was a lady earlier on this call, I apologize, I forget her name, at 414 Mill, asking on behalf of her owner and his concerns, and a very strong yes, he should be concerned. So those are just my perspective. Again, I had a day or two to prepare for this call. I wasn't sure if it was in the in-person one or the virtual one. Again, no one's contacted me about this for months. It sounds like you guys have been working on this for months and months. That's my perspective as a investor developer in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Phil, thanks for waiting with your hand raised. If you want to go ahead and come off mute and ask it, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, yeah. Well, for the record, my name is Phil Yates, and I'm the president for the Riverside Neighborhood Association. And I just would like to relay just about everything that Sam Gordon just said. I never have heard anything about this. This is a massive change to the general area that is is on this map. The height, the density, what's going to be in it. I don't know anything about it. I have never heard anything, and this would directly affect Riverside. And I guess there was a meeting tonight at 6 o'clock to talk to you. And excuse me, are you going to be having a handout of this planet itself? Because I have countless questions. I'd like the other person's comment about having a round table of developers, landowners, people that are very much involved with the city that should have a voice and need to have a voice, deserve to have a voice. I understand that there have been workshops apparently, and stakeholder meetings.
Phil, you accidentally, I think, hit your mute button. There you go.
Sorry.
All right. That's okay. We can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, no, are you going, first, you don't have to answer this right now, just are you going to have a pamphlet showing exactly what your plans are. And also, I need to know when things like this come up. And I would really like it. I don't know how much of it got cut off. I did have a question about having access to minutes or something on previous meetings, so I know what has been said in previous meetings, so I can to discuss those kinds of things with anybody that is going to make the changes with regard to this new plan.
Shauna and Zach, I'm wondering if you could clarify what's going to be available on the website.
Yeah, Phil, and I can directly email you that website, but it's also in the chat. But the recording of the previous meetings are online as well as presentations, all the comments received, and then same for today. We recorded this, so this will be online
Okay.
as well. And today's presentation and all of the draft materials are also posted at that website. And then if you need physical copies, just reach out and I can make sure we get you some.
Just to clarify a partial answer to your question, Phil, the meeting today is the online version of the in-person meeting at 6 o'clock. The information is identical, and the format is identical. We just wanted to have two different opportunities to be able to, for folks to be able to participate.
Okay, Zach, did you have anything to wrap us up?
I just want to thank everybody for your participation. I appreciate we, on behalf of the city, appreciate all of your input. And again, just a reminder for business owners and property owners, we have an in-person meeting that will function as an open house from 3 to 5:30 today at the Hayden House across the street from the old Hayden Flour Mill. And then a 6 o'clock meeting, which will 6 o'clock public meeting that will follow the same format, provide essentially the same information as this new meeting that you participated in. So yeah, we'll have additional stakeholder meetings through the rest of this month. There'll be into early April. We will also have an online meeting specifically with property owners and business owners that will be working to schedule in the coming weeks. And yeah, we've got HPC meetings or an HPC meeting, which will have a presentation from the consultant next week. And then I believe in about 2 weeks, 2 more weeks, we'll have a presentation, 2.5 weeks, something like that. We'll have a presentation to the Development Review Commission. So yeah, a lot of continued opportunities to speak on this and offer recommendations on these guidelines, these very preliminary draft guidelines. So appreciate your participation and look forward to your continued participation in the process. Thank you very much.